To photograph a three-dimensional sculpture, what we are going to be doing is setting up a piece of plain paper. You can use gray paper, just try to use a neutral of a color as you can find. White, gray work the best. Black will work in a pinch, but it tends to kind of be a little bit too high contrast for a lot of things. And I'm going to clip it to the top here and just curve it down underneath my sculpture. Now if I'm in a pinch, I can also use something like fabric, but you'll want to make sure you iron it before you use it so you don't have these wrinkles kind of distracting your view. Then you're going to just move it around and photograph based on the best angles of your piece. So this might be a good one, this might be a good one. You don't want to do something like this where you're not seeing any of the dimension of the piece. So that would work really well. You also want to make sure you're using natural light. So the light's coming in from the side, not directly creating a huge cast shadow. That helps it from being visually distracting. So I think this is a good angle. When I edit this, I'm actually going to crop off the edges, so I don't need to worry about that. I just want to make sure I get my whole image in and get the best angle on it first. Alright, so I've opened my sculpture in the Snapseed app, and I'm going to click on this pencil on the right hand side. This might be on the bottom if you've got your phone vertically, and it might be under the tools if you are looking there. And the first thing I'm going to do is crop and rotate my image. So I'll choose rotate first. And what this does is I can slide my finger back and forth to make sure that it's perfectly level the way I want it to be. I kind of want this just a little bit on an angle there. And then I'm going to press the check button to save it. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to that little pencil tool, the tools, and I'm going to crop my image. So now I'm going to be getting rid of that excess stuff on the side. I really don't want to see that when I'm looking at these sculpture images. So I'm going to get this, I can leave this larger if I want to. I can make it small and more vertical if I'd like to. It's really up to you what you think looks best with your design. So I'm going to go with this and press that check mark. I'm really happy with that. It looks good. You can always zoom in and kind of see how it looks in different scales, or zoom out. Sometimes that's helpful too. Alright, the next thing I am going to do is my white balance. And this one's white balanced pretty well, but I'm going to choose that dropper tool on the bottom. And I can pull it across to an area I know is going to be a pure white within my image. This image is all neutral, so it's not going to vary too much, but if I had a different color in here and I pulled this area over it, you'd be able to tell. I think that's about good. Press my check mark there, and then I'm going to press my tools again, and I'm going to tune my image. Again, when you're using natural light, most of the time your images turn out pretty well, but you might need to up the brightness and contrast or play with the shadows. So I'm going to look at those shadows there, and I might just pull those up a little bit brighter. And I might pull my highlights down because this does look a little bit blown out. I'm not getting some of those details and some of those really bright areas, so I'm going to pull those down just a little bit. And I'm going to go to my brightness, make that a little bit less bright. Maybe up the contrast a little bit more. And I'm good. I can always hold my finger down on it to look back at the original. So you can see I got it a little bit more neutral. There's a little bit more warm there, so it's looking good. Alright, I'm ready to export this. So I'm going to choose that bottom right little export icon, and then I can save a copy, and that'll save it right to my camera roll as a JPEG image. So it looks good, and I'm ready to use it. The same thing goes if you're using this to photograph something like jewelry. You could leave this set up like this, or you could just flatten out the back of it so it kind of moves back in the background. Either way, but you want to have a surface that's plain, that's free of distraction, that's not going to take your eye away from what you are intending to show us. So for this one, when you're photographing jewelry, it's tough because it's this weird form. You don't want to kind of put it plain across here and just take a picture of it because that looks kind of bad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of play around with a few different positioning methods. So if you really want to focus on the pendant for one of them, you could crop it out and do something like this. You could do an angle like this. This tends to look nice because it's a little bit more dynamic of an image. Sometimes you can curl up the edge of it a little bit and really focus on the front part like that. You don't want to, you want to avoid just kind of laying it out haphazardly, like that. You really want to put some thought into how you're going to arrange that in the surface and then how you're going to crop that once you get the image done. And you can always crop these to be square. So if I were to crop this edge out and this edge out, that's something you can do. But just take that little extra time to crop these nicely. Okay, so I have opened my image of my necklace in the Snapseed app, and I'm going to edit it. So I'm going to choose that pencil tool on the right, and the first thing I'm going to do is rotate my image. So I want to do this just to kind of get the best angle I can. Rotate it just very slightly. I'm happy with that, so I'll press the check mark to save it. And then I'm going to crop my image. So this is going to kind of take out any of that excess, like you can see the table in the back. I'm going to take that out and make sure that the focus is entirely on the pendant. I don't want to crop it too tightly or too far away from my image because that can make it look awkward. I'm going to press my check mark. Anytime you need to change something, if you look along the top, that first icon on the right hand side, there's that little stack with an arrow on it. You can always undo something or redo it if you've made a mistake. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to white balance my image. So that's on the top row of selections here. And I'm going to use that dropper tool on the bottom. I'm just going to pull this over to a neutral area within my design. So this is a neutral, very light gray white. And what that's going to do is it's going to adjust the temperature of the image. You'll want to either choose a white, a gray, or a black. If you choose something like a non-neutral color, it's going to adjust the rest of your image to that. So you want to do a neutral color. All right, now I am going to tune my image. So one thing I'd like to do is kind of bring up the brightness slightly and take out some of the really dark shadows. So I'm going to start with my shadows, and I'm actually going to move them. You can see as I move my cursor this way by just sliding my finger, kind of gets rid of some of that darkness of the shadows. Then I'm going to take my highlights, and instead of pushing them up, I'm actually going to push them down just slightly because I'm going to go to my brightness and push that up slightly. And then last but not least, I'll play around with my contrast. I might push that down very slightly. You'll be able to kind of get a feel for this as you're looking at your own. So I'll save those changes, and I can see what it looked like before and after. I kind of took some of that harshness of the light and dark out. All right, my next step is going to be a really fun part of this app, which is to use the lens blur. So that's my selection on the bottom right here. I'm going to click that, and I can use two fingers. I can widen this. I can make it shorter if I want. But what I want to do is I want to center it, that inner part of my circle or ellipse, on the front part of my pendant. And you don't have to do this, but I think it makes it look really nice and professional. And then I'm going to up the amount of blur in the background. So what happens is the area within there stays nice and focused, but then it blurs everything. It transitions in that second oval, and then everything outside of there blurs pretty significantly. And I can change the blur amount by just sliding my finger back and forth so we can see it's nice and clear. That's my normal image. That's what it would look like super blurred, which I don't think that looks very good either. I'm just going to blur it slightly, and this will make it look like a digital SLR camera would take it, so it makes it look like a fairly professional image. All right, so now our focus is on the really important area, the pendant. The clasp is secondary, but it's still included in there. And we're ready to go. So now we would export our image. So on the bottom right there's that little export button. And I always choose save a copy because then it creates a copy that is separate from your original image so that it's not overwriting it. So if you needed that for something else, you could use it. So I'm going to choose that. And we are good to go. So you have a nice edited image.